Well, welcome in. I am going to start sharing my screen so we can get started. I know some more people will start filing in as we go along. But we have a lot to cover today because we're talking all about variables and looping and conditional logic, the basic foundations of programming. So it's important that we get this foundational stuff correct so that we can effectively build on our knowledge as software engineers. So if you've started doing any kind of coding yet already, you probably have done the very elemental thing of declaring a variable. Variables allow us to store data. When we store data, we can reference it later, and then we can do stuff with it. And then if we use that data that we stored and apply some logic, perhaps some conditional logic, then we can create what's known as control flow in our code that allows us to run functionality based on certain conditions. And then we can also do something called looping, which is how we tell our program to, hey, go do something over and over and over again until some condition is met. And by combining all of these ideas, we could actually begin to start doing some pretty interesting stuff in our code. But first, on a very high level, because I know that this part can kind of get lost in the weeds sometimes, where does JavaScript fit in terms of web development? You know, we're all here because we want to be software engineers and we want to get a job as a software engineer and do web development. How does JavaScript fit into all of that? And why are we even using JavaScript at all? And it's because JavaScript is the tool that we use to write instructions to tell our web browser what to do. As in, JavaScript is the language of the web. And it works in conjunction with these two other tools, HTML and CSS. HTML defines the structure of a web page. I always like to use the car analogy. So if you think of a car, HTML would be the metal frame of a car. CSS describes how we want a web page to look. Do we want the button on the Codesmith homepage to be this color of teal, or do we want it to be orange, right? That's CSS. CSS stands for cascading style sheets. CSS is all about styling. JavaScript is about applying logic to our web page. So if HTML is the metal frame of the car and CSS is the styling, so whether or not the car is blue versus orange versus purple with a yellow stripe going across the hood, JavaScript is going to be the engine in that analogy. JavaScript is what makes this button work when you click it. So when we learn JavaScript, we are learning a very powerful tool that we can use in web development that tells a web page how to operate when a user interacts with it, the engine of the car. All right. Let's start looking at a little bit of code. This is going to be a very interactive workshop, so be prepared. All right, cool. What happens when JavaScript code runs? As in, you're typing away in CSX, or you're typing away in CSBin, or you're working on Code Wars, and you hit that run button to run your code. What's actually happening when you do that? So here's the thing. when you're working in those kinds of coding environments, there is a program that's working under the hood when you click that run button. Let's call this an engine. This engine is going through your JavaScript code that you've written line by line, and it's interpreting that for you and interpreting what it is you wanted to do. So this engine is going to go through code line by line and save information, also called data, that we tell it to save based on using a couple of keywords. This allows us to reference, change, or run functionality on our data later. So, given that, let's see. Let me hear from Annalise. You're muted. You're still muted.
Okay, there we go.
Cool. What do you think is happening on the first line, this very first line of code here?
So we're defining a variable num and assigning it to the value 3.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're declaring a variable or initializing a variable num and assigning it the value of 3. So to make this even more specific, this is what we call our label. And this is going to be the data. So we're saving data under a label. And we can reference that label anytime we want to use that data later on in our code. And please stick with me. What's happening on the next line?
So then we're declaring another label or labeling another variable and assigning it to a string Codesmith.
For sure. I would say that as we're initializing a variable labeled name and assigning it the value of Codesmith. But yes, excellent job. So the same thing is happening here. But there is one tiny difference between the two, specifically in the keyword that we're using to declare our
data. Yes, so, oh my gosh, I honestly don't remember the specifics of the difference between a variable or the var and the let.
That's okay. That is completely okay. That is okay because we're going to talk about it.
Cool.
But it's great that you know that there is a difference. So when we are in modern JavaScript to declare a variable, we are only going to use let and const. Var was a way to declare a variable years ago in JavaScript. But like all programming languages, the language changes over time. And in 2015, the JavaScript language changed and gave us the options of using let and const to declare variables. We show var here because it might be the case that in a blog post or in a Stack Overflow post, you might see var written in some code. And so we just want to show it to you to show you that it was a thing once. But in modern JavaScript, var is not used. And the difference between them has to do with a concept called scoping. And you will learn more about that later on, specifically in CS Prep. What you need to just know now is that you essentially want to use a let and const anytime you want to declare a variable. Very good.
This makes sense because I was like, I think I've only used let and const like since I think they talked about var once.
As well you should. As well cool. You should.
Great, thank
She's
you.
like, ooh, haven't been doing anything wrong this whole time. Cool. Thank you so much, Annalise. Let me pass it to Brianna. Talk to me about the next line of code that we have happening here.
Okay, so we're going to declare another variable store of info um we're declaring a variable store of info to the keyword const and assigning it to an object. And within the object, we have a key name and its value is a string Codesmith. Next key is home and its value is an array. And within the array, we have a string New York City and string Los Angeles.
Yes, great job on the object bit. Let me clean up the first part. So we are initializing a constant labeled store of info. Because we're using that const keyword, we're telling JavaScript that we want to create a constant. And a constant is a is something that we can't reassign afterwards later on in our code. So if I later on in this code decided to write store of info and use this right here, which looks like an equal sign, but in the context of JavaScript, in this situation, this is the assignment operator. So if I was trying to reference this label and reassign it, like if I wrote store the info, and then I wanted to reassign it to be the string, say cat, JavaScript wouldn't allow me to do that because you can't reassign constants. But great job on the object bit, absolutely. So we have an object where we have a key name with the value Codesmith, string Codesmith, and then a key home with the value of an array that has two elements, the first one being the string New York City, the second one being the string Los Angeles. Great job, Brianna. All right, let me hear from Autumn. Talk to me about the next line.
Sorry about that. I'm working on two screens, so it took me a while to get my mouse over.
No worries. We're here.
Let's see, we're declaring a constant called or random list and assigning it the value of an array with multiple pieces. One is a number.
Elements.
Components, thank you.
Elements.
Sorry. A number of elements. One is a number, two is a string, three is an array, and four is an object.
Absolutely, absolutely. Fantastic work, Autumn. And then last but not least, I'll give this one to you. We are declaring a variable labeled intro to JavaScript is awesome, and it is assigned to the Boolean true. So let's, now that we've just gotten ourselves acquainted with this code and we've done a little warm up, let's move over to just diagramming this out and seeing what this looks like when JavaScript is reading our code line by line. Does anyone know where we run code? And this is one of these things, if you've come to this workshop before or watched a recording of it, where is the place where we write this code? Jermaine got it in the chat, the global execution context, yes. So let me draw that out for us. We are going to have a global execution context. And this is where all of the operations of our code is going to happen. We always start in the global execution context. And along with the global execution context, we are also going to have something called global memory. And this is where JavaScript will be saving all of the data that we are trying to save under a label. So let me hear from Bogdana. Hey.
Hi.
So walk me through the first line of code.
Sorry, I'm like a little confused as to what I'm supposed to be doing.
No worries, no worries. So JavaScript is going to be reading this code line by line. We mentioned on the previous slide that by saving information using special declaration keywords like var, let, and const, these declaration keywords that tells JavaScript that we're declaring a variable. By using those keywords, we're able to save data under a label, and this allows us to reference it later. And the place where we save that information is going to be in global memory. So, since we are using a declaration keyword on the first line, var, and we're trying to save a piece of data, 3, under the label num, where are we going to save that?
The global memory.
Yeah, we're going to save that in global memory, and that's going to look like this, where we have num that has the value of 3. The label num has a value of 3. Talk to me about the next one, Bogdana.
And then you'll do the same thing with name and Codesmith
Yes, where am I saving it?
in the global memory.
That's right. In global memory. All right, let me pass it off to someone else to finish this up. Let me hear from I forgot how to say your name. I'm so sorry.
Hemalata.
Himalata. I got it the first
Yeah.
time. Okay. Himalata, talk to me about the next line.
Now we are going to store, we are going to keep store of info in a global memory.
Okay, so store of info in a global memory. Great. And that is an object. Actually, I'm not going to have enough room if I do it that way. Let's do it this way, where we have the key name. That's the value of Codesmith. And the key home, which has, an array, the element New York City, and Los Angeles. Great. All right, give me the next one.
Then the next variable const random list, we are going to put it in a global memory. It is going to be in a global memory. With an number with different elements.
Yep. So we have random list, global memory, with a bunch of different elements. Great. All right, give me the last one.
Next one is going to be intro to JavaScript is awesome, which is equal to Boolean value. That is in global memory.
It's assigned to Boolean value. That's the assignment operator there. Yeah. Intro to JavaScript is awesome. Awesome. And that's the value of true. Thank you so much, Himlata.
Thank you.
Cool. So we just worked through this to see how we can save data, information in the global memory under some label, but we haven't got to the point where we're doing stuff with it yet, but we're getting to that. Questions about this so far? Or as we like to do in Codesmith, to get a temperature check of the room, give me thumbs up if you're feeling good about this, sideways thumbs if you have a clarifying question, down thumbs if I've lost you already. All right, awesome. Great. And if you don't have your camera on, but you can have it on, please do, so I can see your thumb and I could know how you feel about what's going on. All right. So let's actually do something with the data that we're saving. Because before, like, we saved a bunch of stuff, but we didn't do anything about it. So that was a little anticlimactic, but I think we can do better. All right, so we can execute different functionality based on specific conditions in coding. So we can do something based on a condition. And this is something that we call control flow. It's a feature of JavaScript, but it's also a pretty common feature in all programming languages, where we want to do something if something is true or false or some other combination of conditional logic. And there's a lot that you can do with this. And we do control flow and conditional statements in JavaScript using the if keyword, else if keyword, the else keyword. By using these keywords in our code, we're able to tell JavaScript that we are writing a conditional statement. And we can use multiple if statements or multiple combinations of different statements in order to create some complex, some more complex control flow. All right, let's just get into it. Let's see what this looks like. So just like before, I need to set up my environment for writing out code. Autumn, tell me, what do I need in order to get started? Where do we need to start?
Context and a global memory.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We need our global execution context and our global memory. Cool. All right, now that we have that out of the way, Autumn, tell me what the first line of code says to do.
We're declaring a constant migrate and assigning it the value of 75, and that will go into global memory.
Yeah, so in global memory, oops, we're going to have a constant labeled migrade, and that is going to have the value of 75. All right, stick with me, Autumn. What's the next thing that we have happening here?
Okay, then we're doing an if else, and we are running a conditional. If migrate is less than 70, then you console log migrate, whatever
Less
migrate
than
is.
70 or less than and something else?
Less than or equal to 70, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so is migrate less than or equal to 70?
No. So you won't do that.
Right, right. So what do you think happens next?
It goes to the else if migrate is less than 80, which it is.
Yeah, which it is. So just to recap, if anyone missed it, our first if statement, we were trying to evaluate if my grade was less than or equal to 70, and it's not, because we look to global memory, we see that my grade has the value of 75, and 75 is not less than or equal to 70, so we do not do anything related to that if statement, and we moved on to the next line of code, where we're trying to evaluate if my grade is less than 80, and my grade is less than 80. My grade 75, 75 is less than 80. So what we are going to do, make a little room to draw a console. What we're going to do is do the bit of code that is within the brackets of that else if statement. Autumn, what does that bit of code say to do?
So it says to print out my grade, which is 75, is passing.
Yes. Oops, sorry about that. 75 is a passing. Great, great. So we met our condition. And so what do we do next, Autumn?
Well, you skip down to the next if statement, and which is you evaluate the condition of my grade is strictly equal to 100, which it is not. So you won't do anything.
So we won't do anything, and we're essentially done here, right? How easy is that? Thank you so much, Autumn. All right, curveball question for the class. What if we reassign my grade to 100? Someone raise a hand if you think you know what will happen. Autumn.
It'll print out a perfect grade. Like it will.
If we reassign my grade to 100, you're saying it'll print out a perfect grade because...
Oh, sorry. I thought you'll go through the whole thing again.
Not quite. Not quite. Let me pass it to Hemlata.
It will pass an error.
Why?
Because we cannot change the constant value.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, bit of a trick question, but yes, Hemlata is absolutely correct. When we first defined this, when we initialized my grade, we did so as a constant because we were using the const keyword, which means we cannot reassign its value. So we can't reassign its value even if we wanted to. So just a trick question there. All right, questions about this before we move on? Are we still feeling good? All right. Let's see what else we got. Because we did some control logic, but let's take a look at looping. That's where things get really spicy. So we have stored data. We know how to store data. We know how to use a declaration keyword, let or const, to create a label where we can store data and refer to it afterwards. And we also just saw how we can make use of conditional logic. We can also make use of looping logic, which actually makes use of those other two ideas that we've been talking about. Creating data, saving it and using it later, and making use of conditional logic. One popular way of looping, telling your code, hey, go do something over and over again until a condition is met, is with a for loop. And like a lot of other things in JavaScript, when we want to use a for loop in our code, there's a built-in special keyword that we can use, like const and let and if. For for loops, the keyword is for. So if you're writing JavaScript code and you write a for, that's how you're letting JavaScript know that you want to start writing a for loop. And a for loop has kind of like a built-in way of writing out its syntax that defines a couple of different steps that it's going to take while it's looping through your code. Or a more technical way of saying looping is iterating. So you'll hear me say iterating and looping interchangeably. So in this example, we're going to look at a very common kind of operation to use a for loop. We're going to sum up all of the numbers in an array and find the average. Luckily, there's a lot of built-in stuff that we can use in JavaScript in order to do that. But let's very quickly, before we jump into the diagram, just take a closer look at the anatomy of the for loop. So I mentioned before that if we want to start a for loop in our JavaScript code, we have to use the for keyword. After that, within the parentheses, we have a couple of statements. And by statements, I mean bits of code that are broken up by these semicolons that you see here. So this is its own individual statement, this is its own individual statement, and this is its own individual statement. So our first statement here is called an initialization, hopefully I'm spelling that right, initialization statement. And this is going to be something that we are going to do once when we start working with the for loop. We're gonna write out these steps multiple times over the next 2 hours. Don't worry if it doesn't click immediately. But that first statement is our initialization statement. And a very common practice for the initialization statement is to initialize a variable that's going to serve as a counter variable. That will allow you to keep track of how many iterations have occurred in the for loop. The next statement is your condition, your conditional statement. This is going to be the condition that needs to be met in order for the loop to run. In this example, the condition that we're working with is I being less than my grades.length. So as long as I is less than the length of the my grades array, this loop will run. So those are kind of our first 2 steps of this for loop. The next step actually isn't what you might think. It's not this final statement over here. The next step that this code will do, that this for loop will do, is execute the code block within the for loop, within these curly braces, if the conditional statement was true. So I'll just write that as step 3. And then after all of that code has been completed, that's when we do the final statement, usually incrementing or decrementing the counter variable that was created in the initialization statement. Like I said, no worries if this is a bunch of stuff to keep track of right now. We're going to see this many, many times. So let's start seeing an example. All right. Once again, I have a blank page and I need to set up my environment. Let me hear from Brianna Jones.
Well, first we need to set up a global execution context.
Beautiful.
With the global memory.
Yes, we need our global execution context and our global memory.
Do we need a call stack?
Love that you're thinking about the call stack already. So usually in easy parts, we don't diagram out the call stack quite yet, but yes, if you've been to some hard parts, you know that there's a call stack keeping track of function executions for us, but we're not going to worry about that here for now.
Okay.
Cool.
And
all right, talk to me about the first line of code.
So we're declaring a constant migrades that has the value of an array 50, 75, and 90.
Yeah, where are we saving that?
In the global memory.
That's right. So we have my grades. That is an array, and that is saved in global memory. Great. What do we have next?
Next, we're declaring the variable sum and setting its value to 0.
We're assigning it the value of 0. Where are we saving it?
In the global memory.
That's right. Oops. There we go. Sum being assigned the value of 0 in global memory. All right. What's the next thing that we hit?
Well, we have a for loop. So we're setting a variable I equal to 0.
Yes. We're definitely going to handle that initialization statement first. All right, I'm gonna set up some stuff and then I'll bring you back to help me through each of these different parts. But so that we all don't get lost with the steps of the for loop, I'm gonna write them out for us. So here are our steps. Let me actually change color. Let me use blue. So for our for loop, our first step, we are going to do this once. We're going to do something once, and that is going to be our initialization statement. The next thing that we're going to do is to check something. We're going to check our conditional statement. And then step 3, we are going to do something, do whatever is in the block of code within the for loop, whatever that code may be. And then for our fourth step, we are going to do whatever the final statement says. And then we go back to step 2. Let me draw that a little clearer. We go back to step 2. So Brianna, now that we have our steps written out, what's the thing that we're going to do once, that first statement?
In the for loop,
Yeah.
Declare the variable I equal to 0 or assign it to 0.
Assign it to 0. Yeah. So that's our initialization statement. We're doing it once. I has been assigned the value of 0. Now, what does our next statement say?
So that's our conditional statement is that to run the code as long as I is less than the length of my grades.
Yes, that is our conditional statement. As long as I is less than my grades dot length, this for loop will run. This for loop will execute the code that is in its block within its curly braces. Rihanna, what is the code that is within the for loop's block, within its curly braces?
The variable sum, and they're assigning it sum plus my grades with the index I.
Yes, but are we assigning sum or are we doing something slightly different?
We're running some.
Well, not running, but do we have sum already saved somewhere?
Yes.
Yes. So we're referencing sum that's already been saved in our global memory, and then we're using.
Oh, are we reassigning?
We're reassigning. Yes, that's what I was looking for. We're referencing sum that we've previously saved in memory, and we're using the assignment operator to reassign it. It already exists with a value, and so we are reassigning on that line so that its updated value is sum plus my grades at the ith index, where ith is a variable that will be changing over time in our loop. All right, and what does our final statement say? What's the last thing that we're going to do on each iteration, Brianna?
To increment I by 1.
Yes, exactly. We are just going to increment that I variable by 1 each time. All right, Brianna, excellent job. I'll let you off the hook for now. Let's actually start working through this for loop, and now that we have ourselves situated. And Elise, talk to me. Start from our conditional statement. We already have our I variable assigned to the value of 0. Let's check our condition.
Yeah, so then we're going to check if I is less than the value of the length of my grades, which is 3, I is 0, the length is 3, so it is less than, so that evaluates to true. So then you would move through to the third step and do something, and you would reassign sum to sum plus the value of my grades at the index of 0. So sum would be equal to 0 plus 50 or 50. And then you would increment I by 1. So then I would be equal to 1.
I will be reassigned the value of 1.
Reassign, yes.
Yes, but yes, excellent job. So our conditional statement worked out to be true. I is less than my grades.length. We look at the my grades array in global memory. It has the length of 3. 3 elements means a length of 3, and 0 was less than 3. So our conditional statement worked out. We did the code within the block of our for loop, where we're reassigning that sum variable to be the value of sum plus my grades at the ith index. I had the value of 0, and so that corresponded to the element at the 0th index. Let me write the index numbers here. I'm sure that'll be helpful to everyone. So sum was reassigned to the value of 50, and then we incremented our I variable, and now we have to do it all over again. Thank you, Annalise. Let me hear from Hemlita.
Yeah, now we'll check the condition.
Yep.
Is I is less than its length, array's length, my grade length. Obviously, it is less than. So it will come to the next line. Sum will be reassigned its value. 50 plus my grade value of 75.
Yeah. So that is going to be 125.
125.
Now. Yeah.
Then it will increment.
Great.
Increment I value, then it will go and check the condition again.
Yes, yes, awesome job, Hemlita. Great, great work. All right, let me pass it off for our next iteration to Bogdana.
Okay, so next we want to check again that I is less than my grade's length, and that'll be true. And then we want to reassign sum to 75 plus 90.
Yes, so wait, sum is 125.
Oh, sorry, plus 90.
Yes, plus 90, so that's going to give us 215. All right, and what do we do next?
And then we want to do the increase by 1.
Yeah, we increase i's value, we reassign it, it now has the value of 3. Stick with me for the next round. What do we do after that?
We're gonna check again, and it's not gonna pass because it's the same length.
Right. Our conditional statement does not pass. 3 is not less than 3. So what do you think we do next?
Go to the next line of code.
Yeah. What's the next line of code that we have?
Let average equal the sum divided by my grade length.
All right, let's break it down. It looks like we're using a variable declaration keyword. So where might we be saving information?
In the global memory.
Yeah, so we're saving the label average in global memory. And average's value is going to be assigned to be sum divided by mygrades.length. So that's going to be 225 divided by 3. I'll spare you all the need for pulling out your phone calculators. It is, I believe, 71.6. And then we're done. Thank you so much, Bogdana. Questions? Because this is pretty powerful stuff, right? We were able to iterate through an array, keep track of a counter variable that we get when we initialize our for loop, that I variable. And because that starts at 0, and we know that array indices start at 0, we're able to have our loop kind of in step with our array so that we could access an element of the array every time using bracket notation. And anytime we wanted to access the ith element in the array, we were able to do that because of the variable that we created. Brianna, question.
Okay, so when you're counting the length of the array, do you count it 1, 2, 3, or do you start at 0? Or
Great question. So the length is going to be reflective of how many elements are in the array. So 3 elements means length of 3. But when we're counting the indices, we don't say that 50 is the first element of the array. We say that 50 is the 0th element of the array.
okay.
Cool. Great question. Great question. Any other thoughts before we move on and see more for loop action? All right. We're going to get more practice with this. Because what if we decide to go crazy and decide, let's put a loop inside of another loop and see what happens? Now, you could do that. The thing is, it's usually best practice to avoid nested loops because in programming, there's this concept called time complexity. And what that really means is how much time it takes for your code to accomplish a task. When we do things like putting a loop inside of another loop, that adds time complexity. That makes your program take a longer time to complete a task. And that's not something that we want. We want to write efficient code that can do things as quickly as possible. But sometimes, in some rare cases, you can't avoid doing a nested loop. But just something to be aware of early on in your journey. If you can avoid it, you probably should. And in order to drive the point home of how long it takes in order to work through a nested for loop, we're going to diagram it out. All right. Once again, I have a blank page. Hemleta, help me out. How do I set up our environment?
We are going to use global execution context with global memory.
Yes, we are once again going to have a global execution context and a global memory. What is the first line of code that we have here, Hemleta?
Const num, which is assigned to the array element, array values.
Yes. But 1 second, I'm just drawing a quick console down here. Get to that later. But yes, my nums is going to have value of 50, 75, and 90 in our global memory. What do we have next?
Then we have a conditional check, a for loop.
Yes, we have our for loop. Just like before, I'm going to write out the steps because we might get lost given that we have some nested for loops. So I'm going to write this outer for loop in blue Say this is for loop 1. Our first step, just like before, we are going to do this once. Then we are going to check our conditional statement. Then we are going to do something, whatever is in the block of the for loop. Then, now I need to make some room here. And then our last step is going to be to do whatever the final statement tells us to do. And then we go back to step 2. All right, Hamilton, talk to me. What is the initialization statement for our for loop, the thing that we're going to do once?
I is equal to 0. I is
Yeah. Assigned the value of 0.
assigned
Yes.
to 0.
What do we do next?
Check this is, we are going to check the condition. If I is less than my num length, which is 3. Then we are going to declare a variable num1 equal to
Yes.
assigned to num1 assigned to my num array, first element of array.
So we have a constant labeled num1, and it's assigned to my nums at the ith index.
Yeah.
Great.
Be 50. My num1 is going to be 50.
Yes. So let me start checking things off. So we're here because our conditional statement is true. I is less than my nums.length, I being 0, my nums.length is 3, 0 is less than 3. So now we're doing something, we're declaring that constant, which we just did, and now we're going to hit another line within that block within our outer for loop. What's the next thing we do after we declare that constant?
After that, we are going to enter into a second loop.
Yes. All right, just like before, I'm gonna write out the steps. For our inner for loop, I'm gonna use purple for this one. Step 1, just like before, we are going to do this once. Step 2, we are going to check our conditional. Step 3, do something. And step 4, running out of space. Let me move this down just a little bit. All right, step 4, do this. I'm also noticing that for our outer for loop, under our step 4, I neglected to write I++. All right, we have our steps for our inner for loop.
Yeah.
Great job, Hemlata. I'm going to pass it off to someone else to walk through these steps for our inner for loop. Let me hear from Autumn. Talk to me.
Okay, so we're initializing or J at the value of 0.
Yes.
And then we're checking the condition J is less than my nums.length.
Yes. Is J less than my nums dot length? Is J less than my nums dot length?
J is less than, yes.
Yes, it is. All right, so because our conditional statement is true, what's the next bit of code that we're going to encounter?
We declare a constant num2. and assign it the value of my nums at index j.
Const num2 and assign it my nums at index j or the ith index. Yes, what's the next line after that?
Then console log sum just as a string, sum colon num1 plus num2.
Yeah. So if we've reached this point in our code, we're gonna hit that console log where we're console logging the string sum and then num1 plus num2. What is the value of num1 currently, and what is the value of num2?
My nums is, let's see, we're at 0, so 50. And let's see, num2. Hold on, sorry, I was multitasking.
If num2 is going to have
the value of my nums at j,
yeah,
is 50.
Yes. So we're saying
100.
Yeah. 50 plus 50 is going to be 100. So we see in our console sum 100. Excellent job. And then what is our last thing that we do in this for loop?
Well, in this for loop, you would increment j.
Yes. J++, that is our final statement. So we are going to increment j by 1, and we start the loop over again, starting with the conditional statement. Thank you so much, Autumn. Let me pass it over to Brianna.
Okay, so now we gotta check our conditional statement. Is j less than my nums length? And right now it's still less than it, so we'd go to the next step, which is const num2 is going to reassign my nums I to 75.
Yeah, so when we say const num2, we're declaring a constant labeled num2 and assigning it the value of my nums at the jth index. We know j has the value of 1, right? So we're looking at the element at the first position in the array. So that is 75. So we're saying 50 plus 75.
Okay.
And so what does that mean for our console log on the next line?
So we're going to add 75 to 100.
We're not adding 75 to 100. So, sorry if I've confused, but we know that looking in our outer for loop, we num1 has been assigned the value of my nums at the 0th index, which is 50. And we're saying in the inner for loop, we're declaring a constant labeled num2 and assigning it the value of my nums at the first index, which is 75. So when we're trying to console log the string sum with num1 plus num2, at this point of our iteration process, we are saying that we want to console log the string sum with num1, which is currently 50, and num2, which is currently 75. So in our console, we should see sum is 125. All right, what do we do after that?
Then we're gonna increment j by 1.
So J now has the value of
2.
Yep. Jaina has the value of 2, and we're going to do it all over again. Thank you so much, Brianna. Autumn, I think I saw that you had a hand up.
Yeah, but then I took it down. But isn't like nums2 recorded in global memory somewhere or not?
So technically, no. When we have our for loops do have their own kind of like private space where
local execution context where it's happening.
Kind of, but not quite, because the local execution contexts are going to be specifically for functions, right?
Yeah.
Right. For loops have something a little similar, but a little different. But we can kind of think of it as operating in the same way, such that like these constants that we're creating aren't going to be in global memory. They're going to be in the scope of the for loops themselves.
Oh yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
For sure. Great question. All right, let me hear from Bogdana.
Yes, hello. So the next thing we're gonna do is step 2 in the second for loop, which is j2 is less than 3, so it passes.
Yep.
And then we're going to do step 3, which will be assigned as, the j will be assigned as 90.
Yes. Why?
Because it's the second in the array, or second position.
Or more specifically, what's j's value? Right here.
2.
Yeah, j has the value of 2. Yeah, it's not a trick question. J has the value of 2. So we're using bracket notation on the mynums array, where essentially this j is actually going to be 2, and that allows us access to the element at the second position at the array, which is 90. Yep. So what does that mean for our console log?
And then for our console log, our num1 is still 50. So our num2 will be 90, and we'll add that to be 140.
Yep.
So our sum will be 140.
Absolutely. What do we do next?
Then we're gonna go back to step 1, and our j is now going to be 3. But during step 2, since j is 3, it is equal to the number length, so it will not pass. And we're gonna have to, now we're finished with all of step 3 in the for loop, the first for loop, and so we go to the 4th step.
Right. Excellent observation. We have completed this inner for loop, but we're not done. There's still that outer for loop that we have to deal with. So what's that last step in that outer for loop in blue? What does that tell us to do?
We're going to add 1 to our I value.
Yes.
And, yeah. Then we're going to have to do everything again.
Yes. So stick with me. What do we do after that?
So now we go to step 2, which is it's true 1 is less than 3, so that passes. And then we go to step 3 again, where the I value is 1.
Yes. And then
we enter into the second for loop.
Yes. And let me clean this up for a second, because we are doing this all over again. What do we do first in this inner for loop?
we're going to say that like j equals 0.
Equals?
I mean, is assigned to 0.
Yeah, assigned to 0. J is assigned to 0. What do we do next?
And then we're gonna say j is less than my num's length.
Yep, j less than my num's dot length. Great. Is j less than my num's dot length?
Yes.
Yes, it is. All right. Let me check that off. Great. So what do we do?
Then we're going to step 3. The constant num2 is assigned to my num's j.
Const num2, declaring a constant labeled num2 and assigning it to the value of my nums at the jth index. Great.
And then we do step 4.
What about our console log?
Oh, right. So this time our num1 will be 75.
Yes.
And our num2 will be 50.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's the same thing. It'll be 125 in the sum console log.
Yes, we're gonna see sum is 125 in the console. Great. And what's our last step?
Then we're gonna increment. So the step is j plus plus. So increment by 1, going back to step 1.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Bogdana. Let me hear from Annalise. What do we do next?
So then we would go and j would be equal to 1. Oh wait.
Equal to?
Was j is assigned the value of 1. Wait, am I lost here? Are we on j is 1 or are we on j is 2 now?
J is 1.
J is 1. Okay, cool. So j is assigned the value of 1. 1 is less than 3. So then we would go and assign.
Did my colors confuse you? I think it might be.
I think I just kind of zoned out for a moment and got a little lost, but
no worries. I'm going to use that as an opportunity to change the color. So
okay.
Our conditional statement works, right?
Yes, conditional statement works. So then we're going to assign num2 to the value of my nums at the second, what's the word? Second position? Index.
Index, yes.
Sorry.
Second index or?
Oh,
what's j?
Sorry, j is equal to 1. I'm lost. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. That's why we're here.
Okay, if j is equal to 1, then we're at 75.
Yes.
At the first index.
Yes.
And then we'll do our console log, which would be 75 plus 75, 100. And then we would go up and assign j to the value of 2. Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah. No, but excellent job. I'll pass it to someone else. I'll get back to you soon. Yeah, so 75 and 75. So sum shows up as 150 in our console, and then we are going to go back and do everything again. So we increment our J variable, and it now has the value of 2. All right, Hemlita, help me out.
Yeah, now J is assigned to 2, so it will check the condition. If 2 is less than 3, it's pass. So num2 is equal to 90.
Equal to?
Assigned to 90.
Or has the value of 90, since in this context we're talking about a particular array element, but yes.
Num2 value is equal to 90. So in a console log, it is going to be 75 plus 90.
And that is going to be 165. What do we do next?
Then we are going to increment the J. So J is going to be 3.
Yes. J is going to be 3. Walk me through the next one.
Satisfy the condition.
Yes, this does not satisfy the condition. So what do we do from there?
Then we'll go to the first loop. We'll get a exit from the loop 2 to, we'll go to loop 1.
Yes, we go to loop 1, and what do we do in loop 1?
We'll increment the index.
Yes.
I.
Yes, absolutely. Great. What next?
Now it will check the condition 2 is less than 3. So it passed the condition. Then num1 will be equal to 90.
Yes, yes,
Then
because my num set I
loop.
is 2. Yes. All right, let me clean this up. We're doing it again. Doing it again. Hemlita, stick with me. What's the first thing that we do?
Now we are going to J is equal to 0. Oh, J is assigned
to the value of 0. Yeah.
Yeah. Then it is going to check the condition. J is less than my num dot length.
Yep. Our condition is as long as J is less than my nums dot length, this loop will run.
It pass.
Yes.
So it goes to the expression. Num2 will be assigned to, num2 will have a value of 0th index, which is 50.
Yes. Let me write that out. We're declaring a constant labeled num2 and assigning it the value of my nums at the jth index, and J is currently 0. So what does that mean for our console?
In the console log, it is going to be 90 plus 50.
That's going to be 140 in our console.
It will increment the J. So the J is going to be 1.
Yes. Thank you so much, Hemlita. Excellent work. Non-trivial stuff that we're doing here, y'all. All right, let me pass it to Autumn. What do we have next?
Sorry about that. I was taking notes on something. I had a quick question, so I'm glad you asked me. This might be, hold on, I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. So we're not allowed to reassign constants, but is it the reason why we're able to keep doing different num2s is because it kind of resets itself with each for loop?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
I just wanted to make sure like I understood the process of like why things are the way they are. Okay.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Sorry,
that's a completely valid question.
Where are we in the process? We just
For sure.
J?
We just incremented J, so now we have to check our condition.
So J is J is 1. Okay. So we check the condition that 1 is less than my num's the length, which is holds true.
Mm-hmm.
So then we do num2 equals my num's at J. So
Equals?
Assigned to the value of my num's at J, which is 90. So num2 is 90. And then we console log num1, which is.
Are we console logging just num1, or are we console logging num1 plus?
No, num1 plus. I'm looking for what num1 is. So where is num1? Num1 is my num's at 2, which is 75 plus 75. Am I at the right place?
What is the element at the second position in the minus array?
90.
Yeah, 90. And what's the element at the first position?
75.
So 75 plus 90 is going to be 165. Beautiful. What do we do next?
Increment J.
Yes. So J is now
3.
Is J 3?
Oh, sorry, J. I keep looking up at the next level. J is 2.
J is 2. No worries. Stick with me for this next round. What do we do next?
You check to see if J is less than 2 is less than my num's dot length, and it is, so it evaluates to true. Then you go to num2 equals my num's at J.
Equals?
Oh, sorry. I keep doing that. Assigned to the value of my num's at J, which J is at index 2, so that's num2 is 90.
Mm-hmm.
So you console log sum colon let's see, num1 is at index 2, so 90 and 90 is 180.
Yes, 90 plus 90 is 180. And what do we do after that?
Increment J.
Increment J. Yes.
And then 3.
Take us home.
Not less than my num's dot length, so that breaks the condition and it evaluates to false. So then you increment I.
Yes. What is I going to be now?
I is going to be 3. And you will check the condition is I less than my num's dot length, which is not. So that breaks the condition.
Yeah.
And you finish the code.
And we're done. And we're done. Yes, Bogdana, I see you clapping. Round of applause. Teamwork makes the dream work. Yeah, that was a lot of work, wasn't it? Right? It's like, oh my God, are we doing this again? Yes, we are. And it's like, that's kind of how your code feels under the hood when you do something like a nested for loop. Remember, I talked about time complexity, putting some kind of iteration process within another iteration process just creates a lot more steps for your code to go through in order to accomplish a task. So if you felt like this took a long time, think of how things like this adds up in your code if you are not conscious about how you're writing your iteration processes. Any questions before we move on? Bogdana, yes.
So are we gonna discuss what's like a better way to write the code instead of nesting loops, like if ever needed?
Sure. So we're going to diagram through another example, but it's not going to be that. But if you were working on a problem, usually if you feel like if your first inclination is like, oh, why don't I do a nested loop? There's probably some other way to solve the problem that avoids doing that. One common way is making use of something called pointers.
Okay.
And in doing so, you can use use one for loop to kind of do the job of two without having to do this nesting that we're talking about. So I invite you to do a little research on pointers, and hopefully that'll help.
Okay, thank you so much.
For sure. All right. We're not done. We're not done. We are going to drive this point home. We're going to pull together everything that we've been talking about so far and see it all in action. And I know that you're all pros at this already. You've made it this far, so let's drive it home. Let's see what we have here. Just like before, we have an array. We're going to be using some for loops in order to iterate through the array, and then we are also making use of some conditional logic to do something if a condition is met. So I know we're all pros at this already. Let's just jump in and get started. Brianna, set us up.
Okay. So we're going to set up a global execution context and a global memory.
Yes. Global execution context and a global memory. Fantastic.
In global memory, we're declaring a constant mynums, and we're assigning it the value of an array 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yes. So in global memory, we are saving a constant labeled mynums, and it has the value of an array with the elements 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to do this now so that I don't forget. I'm going to write the indice numbers, so it's a little easier for us to reference when we are in the weeds of our for loop. All right, what do we have next?
So we have a for loop, and we're going to declare I as a variable with the value of 0.
Yes, that's our first step. So I'm gonna write out the steps again. So our first step, we are going to, step 1, do this once. And that is going to be our initialization statement, where we are declaring our I variable and assigning it the value of 0. What is our second step?
So our second step is we have a condition if I is less than mynums.length.
Yeah, our conditional statement is I being less than my nums dot length. As long as that's true, our for loop will run. And if that is true, what's step 3 going to be, Brianna?
We're declaring a constant num1 and assigning it the value of mynums at index I.
Yes, we are declaring a constant labeled num1 and assigning
now,
the value of num at I.
Yeah, and I is currently at 0, and 0 would be equal to 1 right now.
Yes.
And then, okay.
Well, 0 will have the value of 1 at this point in time. So before we, I'm gonna write out the rest of the steps for this for loop, and then we'll actually go through it. So after we do something in our for loop, this bit of code where we're declaring a constant num2, and then this other bit of code where we have an if statement, if num1 plus num2 is strictly equal. Those triple equal signs that you see there is means strictly equal. If that is strictly equal to 7, then we are going to console. Oh, no. I'm messing up. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm getting far too excited. Okay. That's our inner for loop. Hemlita, you have a question.
No, I wanted to ask that because we need to enter into a for loop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you caught me. Getting too excited. Okay, our outer for loop, writing in blue. After we do the inner for loop, I'll write the steps out for that in just a second. The last step of our outer for loop, step 4, is to increment.
Increment I.
Yes. And then go back to our condition. Okay, Brianna, now let's actually walk through this outer for loop so we can get to writing our steps for the inner for loop. So I has the value of 1. What does that mean for our condition?
It's less than the length of the array, so it's true. So we're going to move on to the next step. And we have another for loop.
Before the for loop, what's the other thing that we're doing?
We're assigning num1 the value of my nums at index 0, which is 1. I mean, yeah 1.
Yeah. All right, and then after that,
we go to the second for loop.
And what are our steps here?
We're declaring a variable j and setting it assigning the value as 0.
Yep.
And our conditional statement is if j is less than my nums dot length. And we're declaring a constant num2 and assigning it the value of my nums j. And j's value is 0, and 0 is the index 1.
1 second, let me catch up to you. So we're going to do something if our condition is true. And what we're going to do in this inner loop is going to declare a constant labeled num2 and assign it the value of my nums at the jth index. And then we are also going to have an if statement, which says if num1 plus num2 is strictly equal to 7, then we are going to console log. See, can I fit this all on one line? Lucky 7. Great. And then our last step in this for loop, this inner for loop, is going to be what?
To increment j by 1.
Yes. We are going to increment j by 1. All right, Brianna. So we are inside of this for loop now, this inner for loop where j has the value of 0. What about our condition?
So if j is less than my nums dot length, which it is right now, we're going to move on to our next step. And so j is going to have the value of I. So then we're going to
Is j going to have the value of I? What value does j currently have?
Well, it's 0, and 0's going to be its index. is that's going to be equal to 1?
Yeah, so J's value is currently 0. So when we say my
Okay.
nums bracket J, we're really saying my nums bracket 0, which gets us access to the element at the 0th index, which is 1. So if that is the case, what does that mean for our conditional statement?
So num1 is currently at 1, and num2 is currently at 1, and 1 plus 1 is 2, which is not equal to 7. So we're going to exit out of that and increment J by 1.
Yes, we are going to increment J by 1 and start our loop over again. Thank you so much, Brianna. A lot of heavy lifting there. Love it. Great job. Annalise, what do we have next?
So now J is equal to 1.
Equal to?
J is assigned the value of 1.
Beautiful.
So we check if 1 is less than the length of my nums. It is. So then we assign the constant num2 to my nums at index J, which would be 2. And then we move on to our conditional. So num1 is 1 and num2 is 2. So that would be 3, which is not strictly equal to 7. So then we move back to our inner for loop and we assign the value of J to 2.
Yes. Thank you so much, Annalise. Let me hear from Hemlata. J has the value of 2. What does that mean for our conditional statement, Hemlata?
Sorry, it's me. I was thinking J is equal to 2, so that it will satisfy the condition.
Yes, J is assigned the value of 2, so we will satisfy the condition. Yes. All right.
Then it will assign a value for num2 to index of 2, which is going to be 3.
Great.
Num2 is equal to 3.
What does this mean for our conditional statement?
It is not going to satisfy because 1 plus 3 is equal to 4. So it will exit out of the condition. Then it will. We are going to increment the jth index value to 3.
Beautiful. Walk me through the next one.
Then it will check the condition. The condition will be satisfied. So that num2 is equal to 4. Assign value to 4. 4 plus 1, so the condition is not satisfied. It will exit the condition. It will increase, and then we will increment jth index to 4.
Yes, great. Thank you so much. Let me pass it to Bogdana.
Okay, so we're gonna do it again for the length it will satisfy, so it'll pass through. Then we're going to num1 will be 1 and num2 will be 5, and so that will be 6, which doesn't satisfy the condition. And we'll have to increment once more. In the first step, and then This time, when we go to step 2, it doesn't meet the condition since it's 5 is equal to 5.
Yeah. Yeah, it does not meet the condition because J now has the value of 5. 5 is not less than 5, which is the length of our array. So what do we do then?
Then we're going to have to go to our first for loop, step 4, where we have to increment the I to 1. And then, so next step is passes the condition, 1 is less than 5. And then in step 3, you can assign I as 1, which will be 2.
Yep.
And
And what does that mean for our inner loop?
for our inner loop, we have to do everything all over again.
Yes. Walk me through it. What are we doing all over again?
So the first thing, step 1 will be to let J assign it to 0.
Yep.
And then for step 2, we will have J less than mynums.length.
Yep.
And then step 3, we're going to put the if statement, or no, sorry, the constant num2 assigned to my nums j.
We're declaring a constant.
Yeah, declaring the constant, and then underneath that, you'll write the if statement with the console.
Yep. Our if statement with our console log. So if num1 plus num2 is strictly equal to 7, then we are going to console log
lucky 7.
Lucky 7.
Then our step 4 is just the increment of j, so j plus plus.
Yes. Walk me through the first iteration of this loop.
So j will be 0, which will be equal to 1. 1 is less than 5, so it passes.
Or j is 0, and
sorry,
so
0. Sorry, yeah, 0 is less than 5, which it passes the condition. And then for our if statement, it'll be 1 plus 2, because num1 will be 2.
Yep, num1 is 2 and num2 is
1.
Yes.
And yeah, so 3 is not strictly equal to 7, so nothing will display in console, and we'll have to go to step 4, increment j by 1.
Yes. Excellent job. Thank you so much, Bogdana. Let me pass it back to Annalise.
So now j is equal to 1. J is
equal to?
Or j is assigned the value of 1. It's j is less than mynum's length. So then we assign we assign num2 to the value of mynums at the index 2. At the index 1, which is 2. And then we would do 2 plus 2. So that conditional is false, or we don't execute that. So then we would increment j by 1, so j would equal 2.
Walk me through the next round.
Okay, and then 2 is less than the length of mynums. So then we assign the constant num2 to the value of mynums at index 2, which is 3. So 1 plus 3 is 4. not strictly equal to 7. So then we go back to our for loop, increment j by 1. J is now equal to 3.
Equal to?
Assign the value. Man, by the end of this workshop, I'm going to get that. So 3 is less than the length of my nums. Then we assign the value of num2 to my nums at the third index, which is 4. So then we do 2 plus 4 is 6, not strictly equal to 7. Go up, increment j by 1.
Great.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent work. Definitely getting the hang of it. Let me pass it to Brianna. What do we have going on next?
Okay, so j is now 4, and 4 is less than my nums dot length. So we're going to reassign num2 to j at the index 4, which
Are we reassigning? Or is that declaration keyword telling us that we're doing something else?
Oh, my nums j is at index 4.
Are you referencing this line?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So for that line, we are declaring a constant. Okay. So we're not so we're declaring a constant labeled num2 and assigning it the value of my nums at the jth index. What is the value of j on this iteration?
4.
Yes. So j has the value of 4, and what is the corresponding element in the my nums array? 5, right?
5.
So what does that mean for our if statement?
Okay, so if 2, well, num1, which is 2, plus num2, which is 5, equals 7, which is going to be true, we console log lucky 7.
Yes, absolutely. We finally got to console log something. So this conditional statement works out. Num1 is 2, num2 is 5, 2 plus 5 is 7, 7 is strictly equal to 7. That's what those 3 equal signs are. In this case, those are our comparative operators, comparison operators in JavaScript. So those aren't assignment as we've seen them so far in our code. Those are comparing values to other values, seeing if they have the same value, seeing if they are of the same data type. So the number 7 is strictly equal to the number 7. That works out to be a true statement. So we can console log something, and we are going to console log lucky 7. Beautiful. But are we done, Brianna?
I guess we could increment j by 1.
Yeah, we're gonna increment. We're incrementing j by 1. J now has the value of 5. What does that mean for our conditional statement?
5 is not less than 5, so we're going to exit out of this for loop and go back to the first one and increment I by 1.
Yes, we are going back to our outer loop. We finished all of the work that we had to do with our inner loop, so we're going back to our outer loop and we're incrementing our I variable by 1. So I now has the value of 2. Thank you so much, Brianna. Autumn, what do we do from here?
Okay, so we check to see the condition to see if I is less than my nums.length, and it is. So we go to num1, or declaring the constant num1
Yep.
is equal to my nums at index I, which
Equal
is,
to?
sorry, assigned to. I've heard it so many times.
Okay.
I remember
okay.
that instead. Let's see. Assign the value of my nums at index I, and I is 2. So
Yes. All right, so we established that. What's the next thing we do?
we go through the for loop, or the inner for loop.
Yet again.
Yes, yet again.
Walk me through the steps.
The steps are we initialize, or we declare a constant J, or declare a variable J and initialize it at the value of 0. Then we check the condition if J is less than my nums.length.
Yep.
And then we declare constant num2 and assign it the value of my nums at index J.
Yep.
And then we have an if statement that if num1 plus num2 strictly equals 7, then we'll console log lucky 7.
Yep. If num1 plus num2 is strictly equal to 7, then we are going to console log lucky 7. And if any of you are wondering why I am writing this all on one line and I've omitted the curly braces that you see in the code snippet, it's because if you write an if statement on one line, you can omit the curly braces. But only if you write it all on one line, like I'm doing here. Cool. All right, and what's the last step of our for loop?
Then you increment J.
Yes, we are going to increment J. So walk me through the first iteration of this inner for loop.
So J is 0. J meets the condition of being less than my nums.length. So that evaluates to true. Then num2 equals my nums at index J. So num2 is 1. And then, or at index 0, and index 0, which is 1. So then hold on. So if num1 plus num2 strictly equal to 7, and num1 is, hold on. Like, hold on, I'm like lost for a second. Num1, okay, there we go. Num1 is at index 2. No, wait. Yeah, num1 is at index 2, which is 3.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
And 3 plus 1 is 4, which is not strictly equal to 7. So nothing will happen.
Right.
You just increment J by 1.
Yes, we're going to increment J by 1. J now has the value of 1. Walk me through one more.
Okay, sure. So 1 is less than my nums.length, so that evaluates to true. So then num2 is equal to my nums at index J, which J is now 1. And so num2 would be 2. So if num1 plus num2 is strictly equal to 7, and num1 is 3, and 3 plus 2 is 5, which is not strictly equal to 7. So you will do nothing, and you will increment J by 1.
Yes, absolutely. And J now has the value of 2. Thank you so much, Autumn. Excellent work. Let me hear from Hemleta. What's our next iteration look like?
Now, j is assigned to the value of 2.
Yep.
It will pass the condition. Then num2 will be assigned with the value of index 2, which will have the value of 3. So 3 plus 3 is equal to 6, which is not satisfying the condition. So we will increment the j plus 1.
Yes,
so j
absolutely.
is assigned with the value of 3.
Yes, walk me through one more.
It will satisfy the condition. Then num2 will be assigned with the my_num index of 3, which will have the value of 4. 4 plus 3 is 7.
Yeah.
So it will satisfy the condition. It will console log lucky 7.
Yay. We'll console log lucky 7. Cool. And what do we do after that?
Then we'll increment j by 1. So j is assigned to the value of 4. It will check the condition. It will pass it. So num2 is equal to my_num of index 4, which will have the value of 5. So num1 is 3 and num2 is 5, which will not satisfy the condition.
Right.
So it will increment j by 1.
Yep. We're going to increment j by 1.
Which will assign a value of 5.
Yes.
It will not satisfy the condition. So it will exit the for loop 2 to for loop 1.
Yep. And then what do we do
it
back
will
in for loop
increment
1?
Index I with 1, which will assign I equal to 3.
Yes, I now has the value of 3.
Value of, sorry, again, at last I missed it.
That's okay. Excellent work. Working through a couple of these iterations, closing out that inner for loop, getting us back to this outer for loop. Thank you so much, Hemleta. But we are not done, friends. Annalise, help me out. What do we do next?
So now we go back to the outer for loop. So we have to assign the value of I. Okay.
Which we did. It is 3.
Okay, so it's 3. Okay, cool,
Yep.
Sweet. Oh, are we in the
condition statement?
Yes. Okay, cool. So then I is less than my nums.length. So then we would assign the constant num1 to my nums at index 3, which would be 4. So then we would go ahead and start our inner for loop over again.
Yep. Talk me through the steps.
So we're going to initialize our variable j to 0 and check if j is less than the length of my nums. It is. And then we're going to assign our constant num2 to my nums at index 0, which is 1. So then we would check if num1 plus num2 is equal to 7. That would be 4 plus 1, so no. Then we would increment j by 1, so j would be equal to 1.
Yes, let me catch up to you for a second.
Oh.
All right, so no worries, no worries. Like I said, by the end of this, you're all just going to become
Yes,
such pros at this. It's going to be like, and then that does that, and that does that. You know, like
It
that's
makes
where
so
we
much
want to
more
be.
sense.
Cool. So we're starting our for loop again. J has the value of 0. We are checking our condition yet again. J is less than my nums.length. So Annalise, you said that because we have met our conditional statement for this inner for loop, we can move on to the code that's in the block of our inner for loop, where we're initializing a constant labeled num2 and assigning it the value of my nums at the ith index. On this round of the iteration, that is going to be 1, because J has the value of 0. So that's going to get us the element at the 0th position of the my nums array, which is 1. And then we're going to hit our conditional statement yet again to check to see if num1 plus num2 is strictly equal to 7. If so, we are going to console log lucky 7. So in our if statement for if num1 plus num2 is strictly equal to 7, we know that num1 has the value of 4. Let me make some room. Cool. Num1 has the value of 4 because 4 is at the 3rd index of my nums, and num2 has the value of 1. 4 plus 1 is 5, which is not strictly equal to 7. So we are going to increment our J variable, and it now has the value of 1. Thank you so much, Annalise. Let me pass it to Bogdana.
So now now that J is assigned to 1, check the, what do you call it again? Checking
Conditional
statement.
Yeah.
So 1 is less than 5. So it passes, and then can I say equals to for this, like constant num2 equals to, or do I still have to say assigned to for this?
Because we're using a variable declaration keyword, because we're using const, we are creating a label and assigning it a value.
Okay, so it's still assigning.
Yeah.
Okay, so so now that J is assigned to 1, our num1 will be 4, and then our num2 will be 2. So that'll be 6, which is not strictly equal to 7. And we're gonna have to add another, or not add 1 to J.
Yes, we can say that we are adding 1 to J, or we can say we are incrementing J.
J. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. This plus plus that you see here, here, and here, that is the incrementation operator in JavaScript, and it just means add 1. There's also something that's like minus minus, and that's the decrementation operator, which just means subtract 1.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah. Walk me through the next one.
Yeah. So now J is assigned to 2. J is 2 is less than 5, so we pass step 2, and now our if statement, our num1 is still the same, which will be 4, and now our num2 will be 3. And so now that 4 plus 3 is strictly equal to 7, in our console log, lucky 7 will be displayed.
Yay, we got a lucky 7. Cool. All right, and what do we do next?
And now we have to increment again. So now J will be assigned to 3.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you. Let me hear from Brianna.
Okay, so j is now equal to 3.
Equal to?
So, or assigned the value of 3.
Yeah.
And it's still less than my nums dot length, so the conditional statement has been met. And const num2 now has the value of my nums j at index 3 that has the value of 4. So we're going to
My, sorry, repeat that last bit back to me. What is,
so
what's happening here?
we're declaring a variable const num2.
Are we
and
declaring a variable const, or are we declaring a const using the const
a
keyword?
const keyword, num2.
We're declaring, it's sufficient to say we're declaring a constant. The const keyword indicates that we're declaring a constant. And then after we say like we're declaring a constant, we reference the label num2. So we're declaring a constant labeled num2 and assigning it what?
My nums at index 3, or j that's at index 3 right now. And
well, j has the value of 3, and because we're passing j into these brackets at the end of the reference to my nums, if we're referencing a variable that's an array and then we put brackets at the end, then we can access a particular element in the array. And since j has the value of 3 here, we are referencing the element at the third index of the mynums array, which is
4.
Yes, which is 4. So what does that mean for our conditional statement?
So num1 is 4 and num2 is 4, and that is not strictly equal to 7.
Correct.
So we'll move on to the next line and increment j by 1, and j is now 4.
Yes, walk me through the next one.
And 4 is less than my nums dot length.
Great.
So now we're declaring const num2 and assigning it the value of my nums j, which has the value of 4. And 4 is that index. So is that the index 4?
Yeah, so when I'm writing it here, I'm writing it to show like what the value of j is. So like we can kind of pretend that like we're saying my nums bracket 4. And so what does that get us?
Okay, it's at the index 5, or
the value 5. So or
5.
The element 5. So because we're accessing the element at the fourth index of the mynums array, that gets us the element 5. So what does that mean for our conditional?
So 4 plus 5 is not strictly equal to 7. So I go down to the next line and increment j by 1. And now j is now 5, and 5 is not less than 5. So we exit out of this for loop and increment I by 1.
Yes, we exit out of this inner for loop. We're going back out to our outer for loop, and we are doing the last step in our outer for loop, which is to increment I by 1. So in doing so, I now has the value of 4. Amazing work, Brianna. I'll give you a break for a little while. Autumn, talk to me. What do we do next?
Okay, so we check the condition. 4 is less than my nums dot length. So it evaluates to true.
Mm-hmm.
So num1 equals my nums at I, which is index 4.
Mm-hmm.
And so we go to the inner for loop and we do
All again.
we declare a variable and initialize j at the and assign it the value of 0.
Yes.
Then we check the condition if j is less than mynums.length.
Yep. Is j less than my nums dot length?
And then we declare constant num2 and assign it the value of my nums at index j.
Great.
And then we have another condition that if num1 plus num2 is strictly equal to 7, then we'll console log lucky 7.
Yep. If num1 plus num2 is strictly equal to 7, console log lucky 7.
So if I run through this, then j is less than, 0 is less than my nums.length. So that evaluates to true.
Yes. J is less than my nums dot length. Correct. That evaluates true. So what do we do next?
So then num2 equals my nums at index j, and index j is 0, or 0 index, which equates to 1. So if num1 plus num2, num1 is, sorry, I'm trying to find num1. Num1 is 5, and num2 is 1, and that equals 6, and that's not strictly equal to 7, so nothing will execute.
Right. What do we do next after that then?
Increase j by 1, so j is now the value of 1.
Yes. Walk me through one more.
Sure. Then 1 is less than my nums.length, so that evaluates to true. So num2 is equal my nums at index j, and index j as index 1, and that has the value of 2.
Yes.
So if num1 plus num2 is strictly equal to 7, so num1 is 5 plus 2 is equal to 7, so it will console log lucky 7.
Yay, we got a lucky 7. Beautiful.
And we increment j by 1, so j is now 2.
Great. Then we're going to increment j to 2. Excellent work, Autumn. Let me pass it over to Bogdana. Help me out.
Okay, so now that j is assigned to 2, 2 is less than 5, so it passes. Now our num1's the same, 5, value of 5, so our num2 will now be 3. And that is not strictly equal to 7. So we're going to have to increment by j by 1.
Yep.
To make j now assigned to 3.
Yes. Walk me through the next one.
3 is less than my num's length, so we pass. Then j is changed to 3, which will be the value of 4. So my nums 2 will be 4, which is not strictly equal to 7. So we go to step 4, we increment j by 1 again.
Great. J now has the value of 4. Thank you so much, Bogdana. Let me pass it over to Annalise.
So j has the value of 4. J is less than the length of my nums. So then we would assign the constant num2 to the value of my nums at index 4, which is 5. So then our conditional would be 5 plus 5, which is 10, not strictly equal to 7. So that doesn't evaluate. And then we would increment j by 1. 5 is not less than 5.
Yep.
If we check our conditional. So then we exit out of that for loop. And then we can increment I by 1.
Yeah.
So I is 5, not less than the length of my nums.
Right.
So then we're done.
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, yes, and we are done. And we're done. We finally broke out of the outer loop, and we can be done. Everyone's like, "Oh, thank God." So, what I hope this proves to you is that having 2 nested loops is definitely a lot of steps for your code to go through. Like that's a main takeaway of this example. But this example also combined a lot of the things that we were talking about all throughout this lecture. So talking about saving data under a variable and being able to access it later on in our code. We declared the mynums constant and saved it in global memory in the very beginning, right? And then we were able to reference that over and over and over again in our loops in every iteration. We were able to use the bracket notation on the array in order to access different elements on the array as we move through each iteration. And we were also able to make use of the conditional logic, control flow, in order to make something happen, print lucky 7 to the console, only if a specific condition was met. So a lot of different ways to combine these ideas that we're talking about, these like really foundational ideas, but if you can combine them, then you can end up doing some pretty powerful and interesting stuff in your code. Let me see some thumbs and take some questions. Thumbs up, we're feeling good. We're feeling a little dizzy by looping so many times. Sideways thumbs, you have a clarifying question. A down thumb, I lost you many iterations ago. All right, I'm glad I don't see any down thumbs. Any questions at all? All right. Well, friends, you made it to the end. Congratulations. For those of you where this was your first workshop, extra special shout out. I know that these can feel a little long and intimidating, but I hope that you had some fun and learned some stuff. And if it didn't click this first time, if you're still feeling a little foggy on anything that we talked about, feel free to, again, make use of the community that we have here at Codesmith, ask questions in the CSX Slack, and keep coming out to our workshops so that you can ask questions of the instructor hosting. So just want to run through this one more time. We talked about variables and the execution context, saving code and running it later. We got to make use of various kinds of data types. We're mostly working with arrays, but of course, arrays can hold other data types like numbers we were working with, and also strings and other data types, even other arrays. You can have arrays nested within arrays. We worked with some control flow in order to add some conditional logic to our code. And we did so much looping just allowing us to run some functionality over and over again so that we don't have to do it by hand. I know that those for loops, especially those nested for loops, felt very intensive, but kind of think about if we didn't even have that looping mechanism and you had to do that process all by hand, maybe all with conditional logic, it would be even more intense. So I hope some things are starting to click, and I hope that I hope that you all come out to another lecture sometime in the future.